Okay, hold on, let me get situated for 1 second. There we go. Good evening, thanks for having me. I've been able to be a part of your meeting kind of on a routinely basis at this point, and I always welcome the opportunity to join you all. Some of you I've met before. Some of you I've been in class with because I'm a doctoral student in the higher education program. So it's good to kind of quote unquote see you again. Hope you're well. And then some of you I may not have met before, but you may have worked with our office. And some of you may not have even heard of our office before. We're an office that in a lot of ways, I hope you don't have to work with, because we are a dedicated support for students going through something they weren't expecting that really kind of rocks them. Maybe it's a medical event that threatens to interrupt their academic progress. Maybe it's a natural disaster or pandemic that impacts them financially, maybe puts in jeopardy their housing and food security. So we are essentially kind of an ombudsman or a dean of students office. If a lot of you went to an undergraduate institution with that kind of office, that's essentially what we are. Penn State doesn't have an office like that by title, but we are a dedicated place to make sure students don't slip through the cracks and don't have to unnecessarily interrupt their academic progress when they face something they weren't expecting. So I have just a couple slides. I think I have 10 minutes or less, and I'm going to leave some time at the end for questions. But our office is typically housed centrally at University Park, but we have dedicated point people at each campus, but also just generally provide support and consultation throughout the Commonwealth and even World Campus. So any student that's enrolled that goes through something they weren't expecting would be able to benefit from our support. I want to just generally say at the start of the fall semester, so many people were talking about coming back to state. Maybe those that were able to or needed to return to campus, needed to figure out how to do so safely. I'm mindful though of a lot of our international students and other students that really could never leave. So they've had to be here throughout the summer and into the fall, maybe not having been able to go home or complete internships or other travel research experiences that they were hoping to. So that's a little bit of a bittersweet taste when we think about coming back to state. I also think that I want to just acknowledge the fact that we are certainly in the middle of a medical pandemic with COVID-19, but there's also what I would call kind of a racial or social injustice pandemic happening too. And I'm definitely aware, as I'm sure many of you are, of the election coming and what feels like less than a month. It's about a month now. Last night's debate, I think we're just very aware of all of the things that could be troubling students. And I think a lot of people say take it a day at a time. I think a lot of people are kind of taking it a half day at a time or an hour at a time. And I think by looking around at the people that you interact with, or maybe people that you're interacting with, you know, in classes that you're a part of, like classes you're enrolled in, but also maybe you're a graduate assistant or a TA, but also anybody that you're following on social media. I don't think you can look at someone and know exactly how they're feeling about everything that's going on or how much they're impacted. So our office, and I encourage you all also to be sensitive to anybody that you're interacting with, and just give kind of time and space for people to kind of show up and kind of weigh in on how everything that's going on is impacting them. Our mission in general is vague intentionally, so we provide students with the necessary tools and support to make difficult situations more manageable. Our approach is very empowering intentionally, so we don't, when someone's going through something that they weren't expecting, we don't say, oh, just step aside, I'll hop in the driver's seat and handle it for you. You just kind of sit back and take a nap. We'll be where you need to be in no time. We intentionally try to be a co-pilot or a consultant or a coach, making sure that students kind of know their options, know routes available, and are also kind of made aware of potholes that have tripped people up in the past. Again, with the intention that they kind of get through whatever obstacle they're faced with as smoothly as possible, and their goals aren't jeopardized. We aim for equity. This diagram's a little bit dated. Notably, I kept it simple though, because our office isn't committed to making sure everyone gets the same package service, because as this model suggests on the left side, if we gave everybody a box with the same size, with the same things inside, same resources, the gentleman on the left would, be able to access the experience, see the game even better than before. But theoretically, maybe initially, he just needed a listening ear. So he didn't really need many resources other than just someone to listen. The middle person did need a little bit of a lift. They're able to access the experience now better than they would have before. But in the diagram on the left side, the person on the right, if we gave them what we give everybody else, they still can't access the game. It wasn't enough. And so we get to know better what a person really truly needs, what is between where they are right now and what they need to be able to access the experience or access their education in our world. And we do our best to equip them with that. So it's less about equal support and more about equitable support in terms of filling in the gaps of what they truly need. I just want to acknowledge that in general, but especially now, it's hard to ask for help. We might not really be certain about what we need. We might not really know if our situation is bad enough to ask for help. We may really know we need help, but we may not feel like we can afford the help we need, especially with like medical care and what our insurance might cover. There might be cultural barriers between where we are and the comfort with asking for help. There might just be cultural barriers to doing so. We might really want to get help, and we might not have many other barriers, but connection might be hard, literally internet connection or access to care. There are a lot of therapists, for example, that are trying to get quickly trained in teletherapy, but a lot of therapists, even if they're trained in teletherapy, they might not be able to provide support across state lines. So there are connectivity issues there too. And then just geographically, where you are and where the best care is, that might be also a barrier. And then there are also barriers to addressing concerns. So when we notice that somebody that we care about, someone that we're in class with, one of our students is going through something hard, we might not just want to interfere. We might not want to embarrass them. We might not want to acknowledge what we're seeing and make anything worse. We don't want to read it wrong. That would be bad if we thought they were really upset and really they kind of aren't. We don't like confrontation. We just don't like how that feels. And certainly a lot of us don't necessarily feel trained for this or trained to express concern and then kind of know exactly where to go. I think right now when we're engaging remotely, many of you at University Park, for example, may have walked a student to CAPS. And so now that we're remote, you're like, well, how do I do that? Like, how do I walk someone somewhere? Do I just give them the number for the crisis line and hope they call it? Do I, do a conference call? Like, how exactly does that go? We can help with that, by the way, but I think that's another barrier for addressing concerns. This is actually a picture of the sign that's on our door right now. So usually we're in the Buki building, but we're engaging remotely. We are physically distant, but we don't want to feel distant from you. We have drop-in hours from 10 in the morning to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where myself or one of my 2 case managers is available via Zoom to talk about something you're going through, talk about something that a student or a peer that you know is going through. I will say that hasn't been highly utilized. We would love to be busier during that time. We're certainly already busy in other ways, but if that's a period of time that you are available, that you want to just pop in and get some consult, that would be really helpful. We also have a general email address, so studentcare@psu.edu, and then our phone number where you can leave a voicemail and get connected with the case manager. We also have a really robust website where you can learn a lot. And then finally, we have an online report form where you can just share a concern. Most of the reports that we get are people actually reaching out for help for themselves. But also we get reports from faculty, advisors, TAs, GAs, family members, just wanting to kind of acknowledge something that they've noticed with a student. And the concerns range from I haven't seen the student for a while in class, or my roommate, I haven't seen them for 4 days, or a student of mine posted something really concerning and I'd like some follow-up. Or, you know, my child was just admitted into a hospital and I want to make sure that their faculty are aware of it. And I'm leaving a bunch of examples out, but really just know that that's a place where you could report a concern of any shape or size, and we will help you either help them or we'll work with them directly and get them connected with resources that are available. And then I would be remiss to not point out our 24/7 crisis line. It's in really small font here. It's on our website as well, but all Penn State students have access to that number that you can call, or you can also text. A lot of friends and family members call that number for advice on how to help a student, or maybe like you're worried about somebody, but you feel like you can't leave the room. And so you want to kind of like text for tips on how to help them and not be overheard. So that ends up being very well utilized as well. I have some time for questions, but one question I can kind of anticipate, and something I didn't really necessarily emphasize, but has been very relevant during the pandemic, is our Student Emergency Fund. So we have a dedicated fund for students that are going through something unexpected, which I think we all are at this point. But I crunched the numbers actually right before this presentation, and of the almost 1,500 students we have served since March, when we first shifted from in-person to remote. 30% of those students have been international students who weren't able to benefit from the federal CARES Act funding. 17% of everyone that we've helped so far have been graduate students. And of the graduate students that we helped, 60% of those graduate students were international students. So again, 30% of overall everyone that we helped was international students, 17% overall were graduate students, but of that graduate student population, 60% were international students who, again, based on how the CARES Act funding, the criteria that were kind of built into that money that we received from the federal government, we couldn't award international students. We also couldn't award World Campus students. We were, through our Student Emergency Fund, able to really help those students that couldn't get help elsewhere. I will say a lot of our university leadership also has enrolled in a program where every month a percentage of their salary goes straight to our emergency fund. So I'm honored to work in an institution where the leadership is literally investing in students who are in need. And so that fund will continue to be supported for as long as it needs to for students who need it, and especially students that aren't getting help from our government right now because of criteria that are in place that limits the ability that they can get help. I think I'm a little bit over time, but I appreciate the time, and I would like to open it up for questions now.
Thanks, Anna. That was really helpful.
Yeah, I'll leave it on this slide and keep sharing my screen while we take a couple of questions if there are any.
Are there any questions for Anna? Claire?
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Nice to see you. I have some questions about the Student Emergency Fund. I'm glad you gave some statistics. Those are super helpful. And you also, just gave some an impression on how funds are continuing. I'm wondering if lack of funds, is that all a concern for you, or are you in a good place in terms of funds?
Thanks for asking that. It is a concern because and I'm in constant communication with my colleagues around the Big Ten. Something that makes our emergency fund a little bit unique from them is it's not an endowed fund and it's not part of my budget every year. So all of the time, we're just kind of passing the hat and hoping for donations. Even you all, GPSA partnered with UPUA and donated money for us to have $20 Lion Cash gift cards. And that is super helpful. We'll be able to utilize them, but you know, without generous donations like that, you know, somehow it's always worked out, but it is kind of, it doesn't necessarily feel secure. And so candidly speaking, like we're helping financially insecure students while feeling financially insecure ourselves. So I was part of I still am part of a presidential task force looking at all of this. And one of the recommendations is to try to find out or figure out a way to make that fund endowed or part of a budget every year so that it's more secure and stable.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alma?
Thank you, Anna, for the time. I wanted to ask, during this time, another thing that has been a big part is having the right mental health and mental resources. From last semester and this semester before, I have encountered a few grad students that find it very hard to get the counseling that they need, especially outside of university student health service. So is there, if you wouldn't mind elaborating how your office deal with this situation?
Yeah, so I'm curious about what you've heard and whether the concerns were this fall or previously, because a lot has changed actually this fall with CAPS and their ability to be helpful. So they signed a contract actually with a teletherapy agency that's able to counsel students no matter where they are, not just across state lines, but in other countries, which has been a game changer for them. So the breadth and depth of their services have been enhanced by that. And I hate to say that it took a pandemic, but it really pushed the argument for having a service like that, because a lot of students don't technically really need to sit in a room with a therapist for 50 minutes. They need more kind of quick coaching or groups, and virtual groups feel a little bit more comfortable, I think, to people than having to come in person. So we're learning a lot about the pandemic. And about mental health access. I think the Center for Community Resources for graduate students that are in State College, that's a walk-in clinic that has other it's a base service unit too. They have a food pantry and some other services that's a new facility that's opened within the year. So for students that have maybe exhausted their time with CAPS, that would be another avenue for them to explore. I still actually think the Penn State Crisis Line, although maybe people might not necessarily feel like they're in crisis, that's a quick way to connect with a clinician, and then that the record of that conversation gets shared back with CAPS, and so that kind of speeds up a student's connection with ongoing care through CAPS. Those are just kind of the first things that come to mind, but I want this to be kind of a continued conversation. So feel free to, I can't see the name, I think it was Amma, but you can reach back out to me and we can kind of talk one-on-one and make sure that you're able to help students that you're aware of that aren't kind of getting quickly connected with the services they need.
Allie, sorry.
Hey, Anna. This is actually connected to Alma's question, and maybe a better question for CAPS or for our insurance. So we're hearing that insurance for telehealth is ending tomorrow, and there really hadn't been communication around that, if that is the case. I didn't know if you'd heard anything or, okay.
Yeah, that sounds concerning and it's news to me. Do you think yeah, maybe we could talk more offline, but maybe telehealth in the way it's been is shifting to more this, the contracted provider that they've connected with. But no, I can reach out to Ben and learn more and then let you all know what I'm hearing.
That'd be great.
Claire?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think it's the copays that are ending with the telehealth. That's what I had heard so far. So I had a question about the Student Emergency Fund. I'm wondering, it's kind of a multi-part question. I'm wondering what kind of outreach is being done. I know you don't want to say it's open to absolutely everyone because you don't have the funds to fund every single student, obviously, but I'm wondering what your strategy is for outreach, because a lot of students that do need it don't know about it. And I'm also wondering what kind of funds are, what kind of things are eligible under the fund.
Yeah, so the fund is not a secret, but I think especially when the pandemic hit, we were mentioned enough in some of the town halls and the news articles that we were, it felt like the right people were getting to us. And a lot of students, if they found us, they would also share our resources with friends, our classmates that they knew of. So in general, the criteria, we're having talks about this because again, our resources are limited. So we have right now less than $30,000 in our emergency fund, and the cap per student is, and this is criteria I inherited from my predecessor 5 years ago, but the cap has been $1,000 per student, and it's a one-time lift per degree from an unforeseen emergency. And it really, the criteria states that you have to be facing food and housing insecurity, which is complicated right now because we have resources like the Lions Pantry and other types of things. And there's an eviction moratorium. So no one really is actually able to be kicked out, but even though they can stay with outstanding rent, that they're gonna eventually have to pay for that. And knowing landlords here, at least one, if not more, is also gonna pay they're gonna charge late fees on that. So it's gonna be a lot. And our $1,000 cap isn't gonna cover what they need. The criteria also, you need to be full-time. For graduate students, that would be 9 credits. We've been able to be flexible too with graduate students that have done all their coursework and are working on dissertations and research and things like that. But you also have to be in good academic standing, and you're supposed to be in good financial standing too. So not an astronomical bursar balance, for example, because I think the theory behind that is we don't want to give a student $1,000, but then still have $36,000 to pay, and then kind of with no real plan for that. So this probably isn't my favorite part of the work we do, because it still feels subjective. I'm still very aware of social problems that lead to students being in need, students not knowing how to budget money or not having as deep of a bench. I saw more than ever before. The pandemic hit and some students had resources just within their family to be able to go home and not be food and housing insecure, but some students really couldn't go home or didn't want to go home. It wasn't safe for them to go home, and it plays out differently for different people. So that talks a little bit about our criteria in the state of things, but this isn't a perfect process. I'm fortunate that we have anything to give students that are facing emergent needs, but I don't think we're able to make every student whole. And we're also not getting to every student that has needs for the reasons I actually mentioned before, all of the barriers to asking for help in the first place.
Thank you.
Char?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because you don't have a sustained budget and you're sort of constantly passing the hat, you can't plan ahead. What are the plans for you to work within either your line of departments, or to get a development officer to help you so you can get a budget this this just doesn't seem to be sustainable as a whole because things are going to get worse. And even in the best of times, there's always students in need. But you cannot manage an office when you're passing a hat. That's just like not okay. So yeah, is there plans for you to get on in development so that you can get some endowed funds?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Star. Part of the task force recommendations, like I said, that we're a part of, had my subcommittee had a representative from development pretty high up that that's going to be able to be helpful to us, but also a lot of colleges and actually a lot of campuses have their own. Some campuses actually are better off than we are in a lot of ways. Some do have their own endowed funds. We just don't have a centrally endowed fund. So we actually were looking to learn a lot from our campuses in terms of how they set those up to be able to have a central endowment, or I don't think it's unheard of either to have as part of my budget every year an amount of money that we can always kind of count on. So I think the right players are at the table, the right conversations are happening. I will say I think this pandemic in a sense derailed us, like slowed down progress, but I think it also kicked up the level of urgency and put like a spotlight on how necessary a fund like this is. And like you said, even in general, even outside of a pandemic, things come up, life happens. It's not unique to a particular population. It's certainly not unique to undergraduate students. So I appreciate your question.
Are there any other last questions for Anna? We can take one more. Seeing none, thank you so much for your time and for the presentation. It was great having you.